So this whole evening is based on definitions. I'm really big about definitions. It's how I lecture my children. Just this morning, I did that, and I was explaining to them the definition of respect. I'm one of those parents that it's like, I want you to go look this up. You think you're doing this? Go look up the definition. You come back, tell me if you're doing this. You know, what is the definition of obedience? You know, and so that's the parent I am. I'm that guy. I want you to understand. And it drives me nuts when people use words wrong. So when you see somebody, I actually was watching a TV show yesterday where the son was going to the mom, and the son said, my teacher said that I was exaggerating, and she literally and he went off on this thing, and it was like, and she had to bring him back down to the definition of literally. You know, like, she literally killed me today with what she said. It's like, okay, see, and one of the things that's wrong with this country is that we never look at the definition of stuff, right? So we've been fighting about climate change for God knows how long now. But you look up the definition of climate change, which I've spoken on in this room, how many times? The definition of climate change is when the climate of one area shifts to another. What we're actually fighting over is the concept of global warming. There is no fight over climate change. There can't be, because it's a natural selection of things. The weather that we used to have in Texas is now kind of relocated over eastern Kansas and northern Missouri. It's a cyclical thing that 400 years from now, if you're still alive, all of a sudden you're going to be like, oh my gosh, it's 118 degrees and we're flooding. I so remember this because it comes around. And it's one of the reasons, climate change is one of the reasons why the Mayan calendar was so accurate, because things keep coming around. Their calendar was round. So all they had to do was all they did was go, check that out. Noon happens at the middle of every day. And so that's how their calendar worked. But definitions, and when we don't look up definitions, then we fight over things. Then we don't understand things. Then we don't, we don't communicate well. And this was a word, the word unprecedented was a word that was thrown around a lot in the fall of 2017 and early 2018 when people were watching the hurricanes. This was unprecedented. But the word was thrown around so much that it ended up not meaning anything. And the reason why was because it had been thrown around for so many years before that. The Weather Channel in February, I think it was, when we had those big storms, we had the nor'easters. You guys remember that? It was just a couple months ago. We had all the nor'easters, right? New Jersey, New York, and all of that. Well, what was so funny was when you watched the Weather Channel, the lady on the Weather Channel said, well, this is unprecedented. Not really. They had a nor'easter 3 years ago that was just like this. Then what was funny this year was, and it was right after we had gotten home from all of this, and as I was beginning to work on this book, was that the following 10 days later, there was another nor'easter. 10 days later, there was another one. And when the fourth one, its name was Toby, so Winter Storm Toby, and they said, this is unprecedented. They said it again. And then they, in the same sentence, said, this will be just like the last three. Well, it's not unprecedented then. And it was like, oh my God, people, just buy a dictionary. Or you know what? It's on your phone. You can Google definitions now. And one of the problems when we start talking, when we don't know what definitions really mean, or we're destroying the English language. We all know that, right? Because we TXT each other. And so, OMG, it just did again. And so we're destroying the English language, but it's really leaving us really vulnerable, because if this flooding was unprecedented, if the flooding in Des Moines was unprecedented this past week, and we keep telling the American public that that's as bad as it ever can get, oh God help us, because that's not unprecedented. I've been in floods in Des Moines that were just like what they have. It has happened. So there's this weird thing where mentally we're kind of becoming more and more vulnerable because words don't mean, when your father gets home, he's gonna beat you. Well, going back 50 years, but you're getting the. But if every time he came home, he biffed you on the back of the head, that's the beating? That's, so the definition of, so it's kind of like that, and definitions like that really, they frustrate me when people don't use the right definitions. And there was a statement that I made to my team about, 2-3 days into this, and I said, this is unprecedented. The closest thing that we had ever had to this last hurricane season occurred in the year 1900, and it was called Isaac's Storm, Now, we didn't name storms back then, but it was called Isaac's Storm because it was named after a guy who worked for what was then the National Weather Service. And he had been stationed in Galveston as a punishment, by the way, for exaggerating forecasts. And he was stationed there, and he ended up, if you don't have that book in the library, it's a killer.
We did.
And I think that's where I stole that from. And so anyway, they started calling it Isaac's Storm many years later. But all we have is a couple of journals. We don't have everything that we have now. You know, we have records and video, and you know, I can just go back on Facebook and see how bad it was. We don't have that. So that's the closest thing that we had to this, but we know that this one was actually worse. So this truly fell into the definition of unprecedented. I like old music. Thank God my 16-year-old likes old music. So my son and I listen to a lot of music together. And you guys remember this song? This was one of my favorite songs growing up. I grew up on this song. And my dad kind of had a hippie thing going on for a little while. And so I was young when this song came out. It stayed one of my favorite songs. And something that my team learned, tonight I'm going to tell you the story of 4 people that left the state of Iowa to go do a simple job. And of those 4 people, one of them is not here. The other one is Robin Goodlick. Robin has been on my team for 7 years. And this is my son Jonathan, who just turned 16. Jonathan is homeschooled, has grown up in this, spoke at the 9/11 memorial at age 9. So kind of an exceptional kid. Opened up his own business 2 years ago. So he has a national business where he works with UAVs, with drones, unmanned flight stuff, and then consults with government agencies and actually does tech work, like IT technical work for groups like bomb squads and SWAT teams. And so at 16, you know, just like every other kid, only different. What we learned was what it really meant to be on an island and what it meant to be alone. And it has a lot to do with the definitions. There's many places that were never intended to be islands that became islands at the end of 2017. They were never designed to be islands. Joseph Stiglitz, who is he's an economist actually, out on the eastern seaboard, he made this statement after the 2017 hurricane season. He said, "One can only hope that America and other countries will not need more natural persuasion before taking to heart the lessons of Hurricane Harvey." In other words, oh my God, if you didn't learn a lesson from this one, you're an idiot. It's translated. And it was so true. Unfortunately, we're already seeing a lot of places that think that it was a one-time thing, and because it was unprecedented, it was a one-time thing. However, we just had this talk about your 100-year floods. You know, I remember standing in this very room probably 7 years ago, trying to explain to a large group in here that a 100-year flood is a statistic. So in other words, a flood like this occurs every 100 years. And what I spoke on was the fact that it was happening every 6 to 7 years. So 100-year floods can happen every 6 or 7 years. What it means is it's that staggering of a flood, it's a 100-year flood. And people are like, oh, well, if it just happened last year, sweet, we got another 99 years. That's not how it works. In the '08 floods, I remember the governor stood there at a podium. I was there, and it was hilarious because he stood at a podium during a press conference, and he said, this is truly a 500-year flood. And about a week later, he said, I've been corrected, this is a 100-year flood. And then it rained, and it started to flood again, and he goes, okay, it's just flooding every day, I'm not saying anything else. So I remember that. It's kind of like the bird flu will never come to the United States. Very similar, so thank God that was true, except for the part about it came here 2 years ago. Or Ebola will never make it to the United States. So anyway, I run a Homeland Security consulting firm called C4L Associates. This is my 35th year in this line of work. I did not start out thinking that I was going to be doing Homeland Security stuff. I didn't think that I was going to be doing emergency management stuff because that didn't exist at the time. It was civil defense. So most of us are older, so we know what civil defense is. And I grew up in the house of a Chicago firefighter who became the first emergency manager in the state of Illinois when they changed that over. So I'm a legacy, handing it down to my son. The Kriegspiel Tactical Support Unit began as a disaster response team many years ago, and has morphed over the years to become the team that you're going to hear about tonight. This tactical support unit, what we do is we fill the gaps. My dad went into ministry when he retired from the fire department, and he used to quote a scripture to me about a point in Israel's history where God looked for a man to stand in the gap and couldn't find anyone. And my dad told me, and I remember this as a little boy, my dad told me that if I could ever figure out how to fill a gap, he said, make that your specialty. He said, not everybody will like you, but everyone will need you. So figure out what the gap is, and I did with this team. My team does not duplicate the Red Cross, it doesn't duplicate FEMA, it doesn't duplicate the Texas Rangers or SWAT teams. But what's interesting is we get called by all those people. And we get called by them because they only get to a certain point. We've been in situations recently where we've had law enforcement agencies that had a massive search going on, and they said, Eddie, you need to come. And you need to come because every one of us has a light, but you guys have special equipment. And they're right, I can light 8 square miles with the lights that I have, and there's not an agency in the country that has enough lights to light 8 square miles on a search. Our team right now, I was trying to do the math on this, and we have our summit coming up, so I'm going to get some new numbers. But right now, our team has a little over 1,000 hours, or 1,000 years of experience in Homeland Security, emergency management, firefighting, medical. I mean, so we're a specialized team. So we may get called in during a disaster. Just recently, Robin there was actually put in charge of the Emergency Operations Center down in Union County, Iowa, just a few weeks ago, because we had 48,000 people without drinking water for 3.5 weeks. You might have seen that in the news. We had a catastrophic failure of a water treatment facility down there, which, by the way, I'm still learning stuff. Who on earth runs 9 counties off of one water treatment center? But it's 9 counties rely on one place. And there's a catastrophic failure, and not only was there a catastrophic failure, but the pieces that it takes to fix are made in Hungary. They're not made in advance because they're $1.2 million a piece, and they have to come through U.S. Customs, and we needed 4. So here they had this whole huge system going on, but it just got to the point where it was like, oh my God, they just needed some help. And we came in, and we were there about 4 hours, and they appointed Robin to, they just said, look, you're really good at this. Why don't you organize this? So sometimes it's a gap that's just that simple. However, recently I was assisting in security at one of the immigration protests. So it runs the gamut, it's not all hurricanes. The other thing, I guess, I have the Life in the Arena Foundation, which was founded last year. It was actually founded because of the story that you're going to hear tonight. Life in the Arena Foundation is a nonprofit organization that right now we use to just support responders. Recent things that we've done is like buying all new uniforms, boots, and clothing for all of the responders in the Virgin Islands because they all lost all their stuff during the hurricanes. But we've also supplied bulletproof vests to police agencies and things like that. So we've had a pretty decent year. 1910 Publishing is the publishing company that's publishing my books right now. Like I said, we have a lot of very specialized equipment. I have an 80-bed portable hospital that I can set up, and that 80-bed portable hospital will go up in about 18 minutes, and I can staff it. So, and I can put that anywhere as long as the ground is relatively flat. Because if the ground's not flat, then the patients, either the blood runs to their head or to their feet. But it's the only pain in the butt about a portable hospital. You have to have level ground for it. But that same unit, there are multiple units there that create that, and that's a shot of the inside of just one section of a hospital that we set up. But all of that equipment is ours. So we have all of that, and it's all deployable from Eldora. Now here's an interesting definition, probably the best one of the night, and it's not unprecedented, but the word island is actually a verb. When I looked up the word island in the dictionary, well, we all know that an island can be a place of, whatever. It's also a verb. So a verb is one of your options in the dictionary. Then here's what's interesting. To make into or like an island. So you can actually island yourself. Or I can island you. Or a bad decision by a city can island you, or a bad plan can island you, which is what we saw in 2017. So the lack of preparedness down on the islands islanded them. It wasn't the fact that they were on an island, because we saw the very same thing happen with the city of Houston for 2 days. They were islanded. So island is a verb. So you're going to just learn definitions, which I could do definitions all night long. When Hurricane Harvey made landfall in Texas on August 25th, it was the country's first major hurricane since Wilma had hit Florida. Wilma actually took my house and out into the Atlantic Ocean. At that time, I was actually living in Port Canaveral, Florida, and Wilma took my house, everything that was in it, and swept it up to sea. What's crazy is everybody's like, well, wait a minute, Hurricane Sandy. Now, Robin was actually sent to Hurricane Sandy. She oversaw logistics for the city of Brooklyn. Again, filled a gap. She oversaw 800 EMTs on the tarmac of an airfield. And she lived through Hurricane Sandy with all of those shelters set up there, with all those ambulances. But Hurricane Sandy did not make landfall as a hurricane. It dropped to a tropical storm right before it hit. So Wilma, this is the first time, 2017, this was the first time since '05 we had a hurricane make landfall like this, a major hurricane. And Harvey was just the beginning. So here's what happened, and obviously you guys know the storm season went into the Caribbean and the southern United States. But before Harvey ever came, the crazy thing about here, we just had 4 tornadoes on the ground in our city limits 2 weeks ago in Eldora, which was, by the way, insane, and it didn't even take down a tree, which was also we were lucky. But, you know, around here you get a tornado and it's like, ha! Tornado got Vern's house. He had it coming. And it also lasted 10 minutes. When a hurricane's coming, especially a big one, it is about 600 miles from the center to the outside. So before the hurricane makes landfall, there's 600 miles of hell to pay, followed by, hurricane drowned, another 600 miles. So from the avocado pit, it's 600 miles in any direction. So before the hurricane ever made landfall, it dumped 1 year's worth of rain in Houston. That was before it hit. That was before the second 600 miles of storm came on. So I'm going to run you some numbers. Here's how much it actually rained. So this is crazy. First of all, 60 inches of rain. Now, Des Moines just had 12, so you want to play with the concept of 60 inches in your head. Now, you also know, especially because you live here, if you got 60 inches of rain, is that 60 inches of rain?
No, it's more.
It's more. Why?
Because it's rain from everywhere and it's rain from upstream.
That's exactly right. So even if it was only 10 inches of rain right over the Minnesota border, if Spencer got 60, y'all got 70. Because you just got everything up there too, right? Mm-hmm. So this is exactly what's happening in Des Moines. Down in Boone County, all the water is received in Des Moines and Boone's flooding again. You're under a flood warning. It ain't raining. So 60 inches of rain. Now keep in mind, this happened over a period of 4 days. 60 inches of rain. 27 trillion, if you want to know where your tax dollars go, somebody figured this out. 27 trillion gallons of water. That's how much dumped. City of Houston. It rained all over the state of Texas. This is just Houston. The city of Houston, at that moment, the technology and everything else that they have, and especially on like some high-end buildings and tech buildings and things like that, at the time that this hit 60 inches, the entire city of Houston had already sunk 2 centimeters because of the weight of the water. Right now they're estimating somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 12, the whole city. Louisiana has dropped like 3 feet since '06. So, by the way, if you want to argue about climate change without knowing the definition, you can tell me that the sea level's rising, I'll tell you that the city's sinking. Guess what? We're both right. That's why we shouldn't fight until we look up a definition. 8 million cubic yards of debris just in the city of Houston. 8 million cubic yards. Where do you put that? Nebraska. It got my vote. 13 million people affected. Houston. I haven't stepped into the state yet. 135,000 families lost their homes. Lost, gone. $160 billion in damage. We were not a week in. So there's the numbers. Here's a really cool thing. Remember the movie The Color Purple? Yeah. Okay, so check this out. You know what this is, right? Observed precipitation. It's the National Weather Service. You can look this up. You guys do this all the time here. Because you wake up in the morning, you check your rain gauge, and you go online, and you go, yeah, okay, so that's us. We're yellow. Look at that. We did get 2 inches. I told you, Herb, we got 2 inches. And so this is what everybody does, right? So here's the thing. So this, August 28th. So here's what happened. This is August 28th. This is late night, August 28th. Notice the difference? Here's what happened. The National Weather Service ran out of colors. Look at greater than 15 inches. The National Weather Service made an overnight change, a permanent overnight change to their graphics because they had to add another 33 inches because they couldn't even tell you how much rain there was. They didn't have the right box of crayons. They had like the box of 12 and they needed the box of 64. They actually added colors because there wasn't enough colors. That's how much rain there was. So by the 28th, 2 flood control reservoirs, there's 2 main ones by Houston, and very similar to like what we have even here and on the Missouri River, like what we were talking about. They either open it or they close it. Well, what happened was both of them breached. So I'm giving you a very fast version. We're already up to August 28th. 2 of those reservoirs breached and flooded the state that had just gotten 60 inches and was now starting to get water from Oklahoma pouring in. So this is really important to our story though, is those 2 reservoirs. Harvey made its 3rd landfall. Did I tell you the part where it hit us 3 times? Here's what happened. Harvey came in, hit Texas, spun back out through Louisiana, came back in, hit again, spun back out of Louisiana, and came in a 3rd time. Harvey made landfall 3 times. Hurricane Ivan did that back in 04. Huh?
All in Port Arthur?
And all hit right near Port Arthur. Yep. Yep. So when it came in on August 30th, it was a dead-on hit on Port Arthur. The other 2 hits had been like 30 miles to the west. But this was a dead-on hit, and 30,000 people fled to shelters. So here's the first lesson. First of all, we need to apply this to where we are, because otherwise this is just a history lesson in hurricanes. Here's the thing. I have found in 35 years that you can island yourself. All of those numbers that I ran before, the 135,000 people, the amount of money, the $60 billion, the fact that the city dropped 2 centimeters and then dropped another 8, all those numbers apply to the New Madrid earthquake zone, which is in the central US. When you look at all of the estimates that they are saying will happen in the New Madrid earthquake, almost every number is identical to Hurricane Harvey. If we had, say, something that was more like, well, here, let's just, how many of you trust him? I mean, I know Trump met with him and we're all friends now, right? I don't trust him either. Okay? I don't. So here's the thing. Here's how simple this is. For $6,000, I can build this. You don't really need to know, but it's gonna end up looking like this when I'm done. And I can put it in the back of a pickup. Oh, now you know what it is. And I can put it in a pickup truck and I can drive it to the center of your town and I can fire it, and there's nothing electronic that'll work in this town ever again. And by the way, I will then go rob your bank. Because your police department won't even know I'm doing it. Because they're gonna be sitting there going like this with their radios. Does yours work? And then I'll burn your town down because your fire department won't ever know there's a fire. It doesn't have to be this large. He's gonna be a big problem if it's this is gonna be large. But what I'm telling you is even a small terror group, even a small homegrown little thing could create it could island you.
Even a sunspot.
It could. If you're gonna jump ahead, I'm gonna ask you to leave. No, it's always fun when somebody does that. In 1859, we had a sunspot explosion. We have these a lot where our cell phones don't work. You guys also have noticed, right? Because I'm gonna guess you're all over 30. So you know that in the last 30 years, it's happening more and more, right? So, and I don't know how many, she monitors these things, and it's unbelievable the amount of notifications that she gets a day on these things. But here's the thing. We could have a Carrington event, like we had back in 1859, which would take out about this much of the United States right here, all of our electronics. By the way, you just got islanded. Because you know where the Walmart headquarters is. It's in Arkansas. Your Walmart can't call them now. And your Walmart's empty real fast. And your air conditioner's not on. Which, by the way, neither is the generator at the hospital that also doesn't have power. So you could become an island very fast. This is why we need to pay attention to things when they happen somewhere else. When they happen somewhere else, that's God's gift to us, you know that. Because we can watch it and we can learn. If we watch that hurricane season in 2017 and we keep living life like we're living right here, then we're stupid. And then we got it coming. And that's kind of what happened down in Texas in some places, and it's what happened in the islands too. So if we had another pulse that was sent over by North Korea, this is exactly what it would look like, and it would almost mimic the Carrington event. There would be nothing here, some here, and we would have partial here. But isn't it interesting that most of the help that we would need coordinated would have to be coordinated from here? And this right here is a day's travel. When I looked at the amount of timing, because I wanted to see if I had moved from the right place, because I used to live in western Nebraska and now I live in central Iowa, so I was like, well, sweet, because I know which way the Korean missiles are aimed. So I wanted to see how much more time I would have from my ex-wife, because she's in western Nebraska. The difference from western Nebraska to central Iowa was 18 minutes. So it'd be just long enough for me to know her life was miserable, and then mine would be. So it actually takes, it's weird, it takes like 13 hours or something for the whole thing to happen. But the difference between like here and here is like an hour. That's all the notes you're gonna get. It's gonna be that fast. And you're not gonna have much notice because there's gonna be rumors. I can't reach my cousin in Denver is about all you're gonna get on Facebook, and then all of a sudden you ain't gonna have Facebook no more. It's gonna be that fast.
Well, and you can't do anything about it when you do find out.
No.
Not if it's electromagnetic.
Absolutely, you can't.
Yeah.
Now, we've got a couple of government projects that are going on right now, so that we will have some communications, but that's gonna be such critical. I mean, it's not getting shared with you. You know, it's gonna be used as a defense mechanism, honestly, and that's all it is. When we start talking about things like this, you guys all remember the Fukushima power plant over in Japan? So again, fill a gap, we sent a team over there. And so one of them died of cancer a year later. That was an ugly situation. You know that there was 2 Fukushima power plants built in 1979. Both of them were built in 1979. They're identical plants. The one was obviously over in Japan. Who wants to guess where the other one is? Come on, close though. Cordova, Illinois. If you go to Cordova, Illinois, right by Clinton, kind of Clinton, Savannah, you know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, that is a 1979 Fukushima power plant. Twice that I'm aware of that my team was involved with, notified on. Twice in 4 years, 5 years, probably 5 years. Twice in 5 years, what do they call it? The Cooling Tower 2, which is the same one that blew over there. Cooling Tower 2 was caught on fire in Cordova. Exactly what triggered that one. Both times that it happened, the wind was blowing which direction?
It was blowing from the east.
Into Iowa.
You're
On those days,
uplifting.
it was what?
You're very uplifting.
Aren't I? So we're doing things to combat some of this stuff. I'm working with, one of the things my company does, we work with a lot of inventors and innovators, and this is actually brand new software that the government was just released to start sharing that technology. Like I said, with that communications thing, I said it's not going to be shared with you. With this new program though, in 5 years, it could be. Because what they just did was they just released the technology that the military developed so that it could be privatized and commercialized. So we now have access to software where if this thing goes, we can pinpoint almost exactly who has to be evacuated, who's okay, who will need what treatment. We're getting there, but we're way behind. Truthfully, we're way behind. The 2017 hurricane season, right now experts say that it will be decades of recovery for those places. And by the way, let me tell you how bad this is. There is a storm bearing down on St. Croix right now on the Virgin Islands. Just saw it. B-E-R-Y-L.
Burl.
Barrel, like where you put whiskey. So, all of this called into question our definition of just even what emergency management was and whose job it is. Emergency management has always been right here in your county. You have an emergency manager, and the county next to you is where one of the oldest ones in the state just passed away. But an emergency management has always been like the job of a guide, one. But that's not right. It can't be. And so it really kind of took over our definition of what emergency management really needs to be. In other words, you need to be the emergency manager of your home. Because if you're not, and I'm the emergency manager for this county, oh my God, you just made my job so much harder. And whatever the population of the town is, if there's 20,000 people, man, if I can even talk 10,000, just 10,000 into having a home disaster kit and a weather radio, my job just got up to the point where I might be able to do it. Might be able to do it. You know, a statistic about 3 years ago, people all over the country obviously have flashlights, but only 2%, they did some survey, and where only 2% of the people in the United States actually have a flashlight with working batteries. Well, thanks for making my job so much easier. And I'll show you a picture later how we overcome that 2%. I actually put that picture in here so you can talk about that. It called into question our definition of unprecedented. Here's the definition: without previous instance, never before known or experienced. So was this unprecedented? I don't know, because the Mayan civilization that was located in St. Louis 1,400 years ago didn't leave us a lot. We only have a few pages and they vanished like that. Is this what happened to them? I don't know. 1900, got a couple of journals, a couple of government records, but in our lifetime, this was unprecedented. Absolutely. Called into question our definition of prepared. So prepared, first of all, past tense. People keep screwing that up and preparing afterwards. You've seen the round thing on a boat, the little thing that floats. A life preserver, thank you. So when do you want that?
When you get
Well, I
done
want it
overboard.
before I
See,
go
she
in
wants
the
it when
water.
she's drowning. This lady wants it before she goes overboard. Thank you.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? 50%
Yeah.
is making my life hard. You got one before you got on the boat. You're gonna jump in the water and send somebody to Walmart to go pick one up. So this is what we do though, right? With preparedness. So to make ready for use or consideration, to get ready, to put together, to draw up a plan. These are all things my company does. These are things that my team specializes in. So it violated our understanding of normal mutual aid. Normally when something really bad happens, like in Des Moines, when something really bad happens in Des Moines, you know what they do? They call Urbandale. Urbandale's got money. Urbandale's got a sweet fire department. Big dollar fire department. Anybody want to take a guess what happened last Friday when Des Moines called Urbandale?
Fire department's flooded.
Yeah, Urbandale said, what are you, freaking kidding us? We're underwater too. And they said, well, it's good, we'll call Ankeny. And they called Ankeny, and Ankeny said, what'd you get? And Des Moines said 12, and Ankeny said, yeah, we got 10 and a half, bite me, and hung up. See, normally, they could have gotten help. But in 1926, we had the tri-state tornado outbreak that started way back in Texas and ended up in Ohio. Who are you calling if you're in Illinois? Nobody's gonna bring it, and that's exactly what happened here. This storm was so big, it was literally left to volunteers. And this is a really interesting photograph because this was the scene when we arrived. And I want you to look as closely as you can. Where's the fire truck in the picture?
What fire truck?
Where's the police car? There wasn't any. Mutual aid, there should have been a lot. There should have been, I mean, good Lord, we could have at least called Oklahoma. Like, what are they doing?
Where is that at?
There was nobody. This was actually just outside of Houston, on the south side, by the Woodlands. Are you familiar with Houston at all?
No, I
So-
thought maybe it was.
So this was the Woodlands. This was just south of the Woodlands in the next neighborhood. Woodlands is kind of high end, and then it goes into this neighborhood, which is that neighborhood. This is coming out of the Woodlands this way. It also called into question our ability to overcome political issues. So I don't know how many Republicans are in the room. I don't know how many Democrats are in the room. I suggest we not start that this evening. But here's the problem. I need to let you know this because it's a federal law now. And we're in a public library owned by the city. If there is a fire drill, all the Democrats need to stay here until the Republicans are safely out of the room.
I
No?
was you.
Who's not good with that? You don't think that's how it was working? That's exactly how it was working down there. And it wasn't the people that were helping. What happened was, and I'm going to tell you something right now, and seriously, I'm not going to ask, I don't want to get into a fight with any of you. I'm just going to tell you a fact, okay? And I'm not pro or against in this room. 35 years, I've never seen a president act so fast in my entire life to get help somewhere. Never in my life. But here's what I saw. I also saw that help arrive, and I saw people that didn't like him, that were also in authority, that literally said, who sent these? We need these. And somebody said, well, the president did. And they said, well, hell, don't you dare show them to nobody. We watched that happen. But at the same time, I had Ross Perot offer me an airplane. And when I told the group I was trying to help whose plane it was, they wouldn't get on it. So it was working both ways. So all that stuff that you saw on the news, where, well, help's not getting here. And then if you flip the channel, it was, well, the help is here, but it's not being distributed. That had nothing to do with any of us. What it had to do with was, well, I hate who gave it to me, so I'm not going to let it go. I'm not going to, and it was just, and it got ugly, and it was not just at a presidential level. This was at a bad time of the year, where, you know, campaigns were starting to come together, and it was just, and oh, it was bad. We had an innovator, an inventor, that invented a floating device that would help evacuate an incapacitated senior citizen. Oh my Lord, if there was ever a time to have that device. I met him after this was all over. I said, where were you in Hurricane Harvey? And he said, don't even start. I sent everything I had down there, and it's still sitting on the loading dock. He sent it to the wrong team. Just ridiculous. Ridiculous. I created a picture of what the Midwest could look like in something like the New Madrid. This is a photograph, a drone photograph that we got in Puerto Rico. It's one of the photographs that became quite famous because right after the storm, we were able to get some shots with drones, and which was nearly impossible because unless you had a high-end drone, you had no signal. There was nothing out there to fly the drone with. There was no way to talk to it. But look at this road, and they were all like that. I had never been to Puerto Rico before, never been to the Caribbean before. So I need a new travel agent. The only time I ever go is when they're all like beaten to snot. So all of this was a gift though, guys, because it gives us the opportunity to kind of look into the future a little bit and say, wow, what if this happened here? You know, would we be like this? What would we do if we couldn't call Omaha? What would we do if we couldn't even call it like Blair or Sioux Falls? Or what would you do if all of a sudden your island did? I'm going to tell you what we did. So we're going to pick up the pace here a little bit. August 25th, here comes that hurricane. Here's Port Arthur. By the way, I have no idea where Port Arthur is. I'm really good with geography, but I've never, ever paid much attention to Texas. Texas was just like a big blob, been there tons of times, but flew in, flew out, had never spent a lot of time. I had been down in Galveston. I was on TV live for NBC down in Galveston, but they flew me there, so I didn't know. I'd never driven all the way across the state. I had no idea where Port Arthur is, but just in case you're curious, it's right there, right where that little hellhole is. So that's where it was coming. So anyway, we arrived in Houston, and the first thing that we saw when we arrived in Houston was absolutely insane. The estimate was 1,400 trucks. So here's the thing, we get called, we're going to go down for Harris County, that would be Houston, we're going to go down and we're supposed to support law enforcement. Now I told you I have a lot of really cool equipment. I didn't bring any of it. I brought 2 of those shelters like what you saw, but they didn't ask me to bring a hospital, they asked me to come and support law enforcement. So I was supposed to set up a command center where they could sit on their laptops and communicate and use their radios. That's what the need was, and it was in Houston. So we drove to Houston. We had a $500,000 command vehicle, brand spanking new, that created satellite and internet, and it had, oh my gosh, it was armored, and you'll see it, it's just, oh, it's gorgeous. But anyway, so we're coming to Houston to do this. We roll into Houston, 1,400 trucks. Attached to every one of those trucks is a boat. 1,400 volunteer vehicles with boats on one road, being coordinated out of a church. The guy from the church is insane. Still to this day, I believe he's insane. This far surpassed Holy Ghost stuff. He was nuts. 1,400 rednecks. A sea of camouflage. And he's coordinating rescues.
What's that you're wearing?
It was absolutely, yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, it was like a sea of mossy oak, man. You should have seen it. The boats were camouflaged. The trucks were camouflaged. It didn't. It looked like Duck Commander. 1,400, and it was next to a YMCA. And we pull up. We've got this $500,000 truck, which is not small. We're not even fitting. And the guy goes, "Try to find a place to park. I'm gonna call the sheriff. The sheriff is the one that's got us coordinating this. I'll find out where you're supposed to set up." We're there, baby. We're there. We plug this thing in, we turn it on, and we're gonna be gold. And it was about 2 hours. And he comes out and he goes, "Here's the thing. I think we got this, and we don't need you." I'm like, "Why don't you GPS Eldora, Iowa to Houston, Texas? Because I just drove that." And he goes, "Well, here's the thing. Jefferson County needs you." It's okay. I don't know where that is. I said, "Is it far?" And he goes, No, it'll take you a couple hours." He said, "What? 2.5 hours, I think is what he told us. 2.5 hours. I said, "Okay, which way?" He said, "East, southeast." I'm thinking, okay, so it's gonna be, how much of the road is covered with water? And what did he say?
You'll come across a couple miles where the water is relatively deep, but you have a big truck.
Nothing more than 11 inches, I think, isn't that what he said? Shouldn't be anything more than 11 inches. Folks, this is how you make it to national TV. That's taken from my truck.
You should have said, let's use my communication and find out what,
There was none.
none from that.
They had gotten a phone call from Jeff County, and that's all they knew, that they needed, that their police department was overwhelmed. We drove like this for 6.5 hours.
Oh my God.
Oh,
At one point in this truck, which had a 10-inch lift, I had water up to here in the truck, in a $500,000 truck. This is how it was.
At what point, this is a horrible question to ask.
How low is my IQ?
Well, at what point do you say, we can't do this?
I don't.
Never.
They said law enforcement was overwhelmed, and we had what they needed. And so we kept going. And as we kept going, there's less and less people, and less and less people. And then we got to this point where we came to a high point in this little town, and there was a state patrolman. And I was like, "Are we seriously gonna go through this? They're gonna stop us." The state patrolman goes, "Need you to lead some guys to Port Arthur."
oh,
Okay. It's the United States military. About 60 of them, 60 vehicles. We're now leading a parade. Coolest thing in the world. Got no candy to throw. But there are people sitting on top of their cars in water in their front yards waving American flags, which kind of kept us going a little bit too. It would have been really hard to turn around at that point. We arrived in Beaumont, Texas, and when we arrived in Beaumont, Texas, our instructions were to meet the emergency manager at the Walmart parking lot in Beaumont, Texas. So as we arrived, you can see what time of day it was. As we arrived, the sun was just starting to go down. We pulled into the Walmart parking lot, and there was not one car in the closed Walmart parking lot. And I began to call the number that they gave me. And this guy's not answering his phone. And I still have to go to Port Arthur. Now my GPS says that it's south, but the Army has turned off. So it's just us, and there was one or two with us. There were two. There's the two pickups with guys with boats. And they were just like rednecks that had picked us up at a truck stop and started to follow us because it looked like we knew what we were doing because we had a nice truck. So I told my son, I said, "You need to find us a place to eat because we haven't eaten all day." And so he of course is like trying to find stuff, and finally they start walking, comes back and goes, "Everything's closed. All the fast food places are over here, but we can see a Waffle House sign." Well, we're saved. There's a Waffle House.
Waffle House never closes.
Never closes. So we drive across the interstate to the Waffle House, it's closed. So, how many of you know that FEMA actually has a program called the Waffle House program? Honest to God. I'm not boring, don't look it up now, but when you get home, look this up. Craig Fugate, when he became in charge of FEMA, needed a way to gauge how bad situations were during hurricanes. And rather than build more National Weather Service stations, which would cost money, rather than put people in certain areas that could report in, which would cost money, he created the Waffle House system. It's based on the Waffle House menu. So what happened was a federal program calls Waffle Houses and says, what's your menu look like? And they go, we got a full menu. And somebody at FEMA goes, green. And they call another Waffle House, and the Waffle House goes, man, we are doing breakfast food only, and we are only gonna be able to do that for another 2 days. And they go, ooh, orange? And there is literally a Waffle House program, and they call all the Waffle Houses along the seaboard and find out just how bad their menu is. Now, here's the thing. When they call a Waffle House and the phone ain't answered, that means Jesus is coming back. It's the end. Right there. That's the apocalypse. That's as bad as it gets when the Waffle House is closed, and this Waffle House was closed. So now we're sitting in the Waffle House parking lot, and up rolls this guy in this car, and you kind of see it right there, that little silver ride. Now, while we've been sitting here, we have noticed that there's water rising on the edge of town. We can see it. It was way off in the distance, and now it seems like it's like right on the city edge. And it's coming up. Remember those reservoirs I told you about? Mm-hmm. Turns out that's what was flooding the highway we were on. The guy didn't lie to us about the water. After we left Houston, the first reservoir went. That's why it was deeper. But now all of a sudden, Beaumont's flooding around us. And this guy rolls in this car. The one thing my wife didn't want to have happen was for her son to die on this trip. This was his first real deployment. This man walked up to me, introduced himself. I kind of ragged on him for a minute about how we had sat in the Walmart parking lot waiting, and thanks for being late. I was a little grumpy. And he said, can I talk to you just for a minute? And I was immediately under that impression that it was like not with anyone else around. So we actually walked over by where you see his little silver car parked there. And he said, do you remember a few miles back as you were coming towards Beaumont, there was a chemical plant on the left-hand side? And I said, yeah, like it had tanks and just big. I remember it said something about chemical plant on the sign, and I remember thinking, wow, it's about half underwater. And he said, that would be the one. He says, so that's the Crosby chemical plant. He said, here's the situation. The water has inundated even the emergency generators, which are used for all of the cooling units. So it's gonna blow. He said, we think probably in the next 6 hours, but they're saying 18. We think sometime in the next 6 hours. I said, what does this mean? And he gets out his phone, and he shows me the last time this has happened. And it's nothing but a mushroom cloud. It had happened many years before. And it was a mushroom cloud, looked like an atom bomb. And he showed me the video. He said, this is what we're looking at. And I just got sick. I thought I was gonna throw up. And I said, what does this mean to us? Can I get back on that highway that I just came in on? And he said, no, because of that reservoir breach. He said, that's probably 3 feet deeper than it was when you just came in. This water is because the Buffalo something, it was called, the Buffalo something has now come over, and Beaumont's becoming an island. Nothing to the north, nothing to the east. The Gulf is to the south, and you can't make it back down the highway. I said, so what am I supposed to do? He said, you do what I'm gonna do. He says, I'm gonna go spend time with my wife. He says, what I suggest is that you go find a way to tell your team that maybe they just need to call home. Spend some time. If you're still here in the morning, I need you in Port Arthur by 7:30. I gotta call my wife. Which if I call my wife and tell my wife I'm probably gonna be dead by morning, my wife goes, well, yeah, because it's Tuesday. But I have her son with me now. This is different. I do have the low IQ and don't stop, and my wife's used to it. I'm in the hospital more than I'm out. But this is my son, and this is her son. So I had to call my wife. I had to explain this to her, and then put her on the phone with him. And everybody else was calling their family, well, give or take, because there was no way Robin was calling her family. She did not want to. Her dad didn't find out for about 3 months, and I told him. and he was not happy then. He was bawling. John woke me up right about the time the sun came up. The minute I woke up, I started coughing, my throat burned, my eyes burned, and I knew. And then John said, Dad, look at the radar. We had had one heck of a wind. And about an hour, look at the smoke. An hour beforehand, it stopped. Completely stopped. See the smoke?
Straight up.
Straight up. And by the way, continued to go straight up for the next 9 days. We could see it from Port Arthur. That was it. We left for Port Arthur. So we rolled in with our big beautiful truck. Guess where? The Walmart parking lot, the designated gathering place of responders universally. And we pulled into the Walmart parking lot where they had told us to go in Port Arthur, Texas. And when we got there, here we had those two tents, and we didn't know where to go. We pulled in with that big old truck, and so all of a sudden, John is raising the mast. He's opening it up. The awning's coming out. The TVs are swinging out. It's a cool truck, and he's setting all this stuff up. And sure enough, here comes this cop, and it's the chief. Thank God you're here. Are you the ones that they said that they were sending to help me? I said, absolutely. We're here to help you. I said, how many guys you got? He goes, I don't even know anymore. I could be down to 4. I said, well, we're here to help you with command. He goes, well, that's great, because I got some volunteers coming. I got all these guys with boats. They're out doing rescues. I have no idea where they're going. He says, I got all this stuff going on. I need somebody to establish command. I said, it's not a problem at all. I said, I'll tell you what, we'll set up our tents right over here, and I'll call you as soon as they're set up. Now here's the plan. We're setting up 2 tents. There's going to be tables down both sides. These tents are a little bigger than this room. So I got tables down that side, tables down this side, chairs, laptops, satellite communication off the top of the truck. This cop's going to fall in love with me. We no sooner get the tents up and we hear it. You felt it first. It was like somebody just going like that, just punching you as fast as they could in your chest. And standing in that Walmart parking lot, it was a crazy feeling. And it was just about that fast. And I turned around, and here comes the Chinook helicopter, banking hard into the Walmart parking lot, right at my tent. And the minute he started coming around like this, the rotor wash, which is how fast?
180 miles an hour.
Hits my inflatable shelters, and they go clean straight up in the air. There's nothing to weigh them down. We're not even done setting them up. And this thing comes in, and just about the time this thing comes in, we hear it again. And we can see another one circling, waiting for this one to move. First one off. First one off. Started walking towards us. But when he got up there, he said, so where do you want him? Want who? Where? For what? The chief of police goes, well, you're the guy with the portable hospital, right? I said, the one I left in Iowa. And he goes, oh, yeah, we need command and medical. There was, a Chinook helicopter holds 12 people. There's 18 on the first one, 16 on the second one. There's 4 of us. We got the shelters dragged back. We got them straightened out. They started bringing the victims in. 2 nurses showed up from the local hospital and told us that their ER had just gone underwater. There's 5 regional hospitals. Over the course of the next 6 hours, we took 120 patients. At that point in time, we had 8 people. And all 5 hospitals closed due to water. And we're in a Walmart parking lot. The National Guard has rolled in on the distant side of the parking lot, however, and they're setting up all of their stuff. I figured out why they all wear camouflage, so you can't see them and ask for help. Their orders were to go to Port Arthur and assist, and communications broke down. So we had the 143rd Airborne Regiment of the Texas National Guard sitting on the other side of the parking lot for about 3 hours. Nobody by us. When this first happened and they brought this first group in, I had turned around and screamed at her. And I said two things. I said, first of all, find your way into that Walmart, and if it's in the pharmacy, I want it. So Robin went on like this incredible shoplifting spree after she found the manager of the Walmart and explained to him the situation. He goes, yeah, I don't care, I don't own the place, take it all. And so 20 minutes later, here comes Robin with like this string of shopping carts, and it's everything from the pharmacy. But the second thing was, I said, you have got to find me somebody who's medically trained. And I'm yelling this as they're bringing these patients to me. And here's this little guy, this little sumo wrestler looking dude. And he's standing there and he goes, well, I'm medically trained. And I took my med bag, of which we had 2. I took my med bag and I said, well, good, then you're in charge. And I threw him the bag and he immediately went and started treating patients. So I actually met him about 4 hours later. His name was Jason Roy. And Jason had actually come from California. He was on a vacation with a couple of frat buddies and had seen what was going on and diverted on his trip and hitchhiked, left his buddies on their trip, hitchhiked down to Houston, hitchhiked another ride, ended up in Port Arthur, and had actually gotten to Port Arthur the night before. He was an EMT from Monterey, California. So we have a team of 5, a base team of 5. We have now maybe 6 or 7 nurses. My old fire chief and his girlfriend, who's an EMT, and her daughter, who was a nurse, CNA, show up the next morning. But this is right after, all of a sudden, he comes up to me and says, the Army's looking for you. And I was like, God, they're always looking for people. Haven't you seen the poster? The few are over there, the proud are over there. Leave me alone. And, oh, that's the Marines. And he says, the Army's looking for you. And you know, it turned out it wasn't the whole Army. It was just one guy. And it was this Sergeant Rodriguez. And Sergeant Rodriguez walked over and goes, we can't do this here anymore. We have to move the whole operation. Well, at this point, we've got huge groups of people that are cooking food on over here. We've got people collecting clothing over here. We've got lines of evacuees that are sitting along the Walmart and the lumberyard. And he goes, we gotta move this whole operation. I said, why? He goes, too many civilians. It's not safe. They're telling us it's gonna get worse. And the helicopters no longer have a place to land. I said, where are we going? He says, well, sir, and I caught that. He goes, well, sir, I was gonna ask your permission to move everything over to the mall. So where's the mall? He goes, it's over the interstate over that way. It's about 1 mile. I said, I don't even know how to move all this. He goes, I have 140 guys. We're here to serve you. I'm like, whoa, stop. If y'all watch the documentary, it's hilarious because we tell the story several times. It's like, when did I get put in charge? Exactly, when did that happen? Because now I'm looking around for the little chief of police guy because now I just want to beat him to like a pulp. I'm like, because I know that he's the one that went, I want nothing to do with it, go see him. And so he goes, I got 140 guys, I'll get you moved, and he did. And when we got over to the mall parking lot, we were standing in the mall parking lot, and he goes, so what do you think? And I said, well, what's that? And he said, that's the loading dock of the Sears. We're in back of the mall. He goes, that's the loading dock of the Sears. I said, you think we can get in there? Well, we're the Army. Here's what it looked like, folks. There's the loading dock of the Sears. There's my 2 tents. There's my truck. That was packed to the door, to the ceiling in old displays. It was a closed store. It was being used for storage. Those 140 soldiers had that whole thing cleared out by about 10 p.m. and we turned it into a hospital. And the helicopters kept coming. One after another, after another, after another, after another. I'll show you some pictures later. We actually at times had 3, 4, and 5 of them stacked up in the air, waiting for each one to land. The Army never knew when a chopper was coming in. There was no comms whatsoever. Nobody had communications. But for some reason, these helicopters kept coming in, and they would just bring us patients, and bring us patients, and bring us patients. And then all of a sudden, AMR ambulance started pulling up in this lot, and they would start taking the ones we had treated out, because we were lining them up on the sidewalk after we treated them. And this was everything that we were getting. And I'll tell you how crazy this was. At first, it was people with scratches and people with cuts and people with, you know, because they had been in the water and they had hit a street sign underwater, or something had happened, or a window broke when the flood came, or whatever. But the hospitals had closed. So we couldn't figure out where all these people were coming from. Now what's crazy was the water's still creeping up around this mall parking lot now. So now they've got airboats that are coming out of the neighborhoods, skipping up onto the asphalt, and slide in that video that I was just showing. I don't know if I can get it to replay. I don't know if that'll work. Will it, John? let's see, maybe it will. Okay, so at the very edge of this parking lot here, and right about here is the edge of the parking lot, there are airboats skipping up onto the asphalt, 6, 7 patients in each. And so what happened was, and I'll tell you, this is where we realized that we had a problem. At this point, at the end of the first day, we have probably reached somewhere in the neighborhood of a staff of 30. Probably at that time, from nurses from the hospital. We had a little volunteer group of 6 that came in. One was a doctor, which was killer. And we had a pharmacy that was on the edge of the mall parking lot. So we had a doctor, we were pulling scripts, and nothing was real bad at that point. We hadn't done any like serious stuff at that point. Now, here's what happens. I got this lady, and I'm not trying to be rude. She was like Civil War, circa 1700, maybe 1800. And all of a sudden, they drag her. It's not funny. They drag her out of this monster truck, which I'll show you pictures of later. It turned out they were shooting a TV show with monster trucks when the hurricane hit. So you know the trucks with like the tires that wouldn't fit in this room? So they were driving around bringing us victims because they could make it through the water. So then now you want to see some rednecks. This is just like redneck heaven, this whole area. And so they bring me this old lady. Well, she's in like a moo-moo thing that looks like a hospital gown. And so I meet the truck, and I put my arm around her. And my target demographic is women over 100. Those are usually the ones that find me incredibly sexy. And so I'm like, hey, sweetheart, I gotcha. And I put my arm around her, and I start walking her, and she's like real feeble like this. And we have 2 backboards. This is all we got. So we're like either carrying or walking, and she's like all feeble, and I'm walking her towards the tent like this, and the wind from the helicopters is making it hard. She is dripping wet. And I said, so sweetheart, where are you coming from that you're so wet? I said, was your house destroyed? And she goes, oh, I don't know. I was at the hospital. And I realized they're bringing us all of the patients from the hospital. So I said, well, what were you in the hospital for? MRSA. We were getting these patients with no paperwork. I have my arm around this woman. I'm holding her hand, and she's dripping wet, and I'm walking her, and she is against my body from here to here. MRSA. Well, that's all right, because about 15 minutes later, we had the girl that was bleeding all over inside because she was all scraped up. And so we were bandaging her up, and she was from the hospital too. We said, what were you in the hospital for? And it was a diabetes issue. And so by the time we were all done wrapping her up and everything else, she says, can I get my meds? And we said, insulin? And she goes, no, for AIDS. So everything was coming to us. So at this point, things are starting to get bad. One of the worst ones, the worst experiences that we had, which these 2 were involved in, was when we started getting the patients that have been trapped, the ones that have taken longer to rescue, and that has started happening at the very end of that day and all into the next 3 days. The one that we'll never forget, probably, because we can still hear it. How old was she? Had to be 20s, huh? Early 20s?
Maybe early 20s, 19, somewhere between 19 and 23, I would guess.
She had had a C-section right before the flood, right before the hurricane. Had gone home with her newborn, and then her house had become inundated with water. She had been sitting for 3 days underwater, with water up to here, with that fresh incision here. And she was keeping the baby on a shelf over her head to rest her arms. It would pull it down to breastfeed and put it back up to rest her arms. She couldn't get out of the house. The whole neighborhood was deep. And so when they brought her in, the infection, I don't know, it's probably 3 hours, I suppose, maybe, of surgery on the loading dock of a Sears, which wouldn't have been so hard, except on the first night, the pharmacy was broken into and completely emptied by looters. So we were down to no meds, and we waited until approximately 3 o'clock the next afternoon before local nurses and stuff started reaching out and finding us stuff. So at this point, the police department is there. There's 5 of them. The military is asking me what to do. We put a section of the military, majority of them, on water rescues, and the volunteers kept showing up in the mall parking lot to do water rescues. There's Jason. That's exactly what a dork he looked like when I met him. I was like, I need somebody medical trained. That was kind of what he was like, I am. And that is totally him. That's him later when we're in the Virgin Islands, so you can see there's kind of it's a theme. It's like he's 12. But anyway, so that first night, you see that we went down a cop. We had situations, down in Texas, we had some interesting situations. The injuries started getting worse, the situation started getting worse. We actually had a DA that had been going after MS-13. And so he got very sick. We had to send a team out to treat him at his house because security was so bad, and he was targeted by the MS-13 gang. He couldn't leave his house. He was on the 3rd floor of his house, and he wouldn't let us boat him out. He actually had a Secret Service agent with him, and they sent a U.S. Marshal to come and get 2 of us so that we could go and work on him. And it turned out that he had actually been swept away in the water, had hit a street sign that was broken off and had a laceration all the way up his leg, and was diabetic. So now we're going out at night. We've got teams doing rescues, we've got teams doing medical. This is the video that you're seeing right here is on a cop who unfortunately had been injured because we had a couple of other issues. But that's what it looks like when you turn a loading dock into a hospital. We used all the display shelves, which is really cool. A lot of neat things happened as a result of this. We had people the way that we built our team, by the end of the 2nd day, we had a staff of almost 100. We were starting to run shifts, which was really kind of neat. And the way that we were doing it was, I'd be like, John, you feeling better? Okay, go get some water, hydrate, there's a lawn chair over there. Hey, by the way, are you medically trained? If the answer was even sorta, I know how a Band-Aid works, it was, go sit and have 1 bottle of water and then get your butt back in here. So we were constantly recruiting. Well, we had this guy that he had gotten scraped up. He had been on his roof. You saw that on the news, people on the roofs waving, And so he got rescued, and we brought him in. We treated him for all his scrapes. Are you medically trained? And he left, and he goes, well, not really. I'm a dentist, which I think was a dental joke. And I said, oh, sweet. And he goes, well, I don't know how much I can do. And I was like, look, you're a dentist. Like, you know how to stop blood. You know anatomy. I was like, we could really use you. Well, the funny thing was he wanted to be used so bad. He had lost his house. These people weren't going anywhere. So he was so excited. So I went and got a couple of soldiers, and they found those old, like potato chip displays that are cardboard. They're temporary for like the Super Bowl. It kind of was like that. It was like the red cardboard shelving units that you see, but they're just temporary. They always put chips in them, right, at the front of Walmart. Well, there's a bunch of those for something in the back of that building. So these soldiers went and got him and made him a dentist office. So they got all this cardboard and all this duct tape, and they made him an office. It was like 12 feet by 12 feet, and it was all out of cardboard, and even had a swinging door. So this guy was going to have an office. For what? Because he's a dentist. Well, let me tell you for what. No sooner did they finish that, all of a sudden, a cop car comes hauling in. This large black officer jumps out and goes, back seat, this one's for you. She pops the back door, and here's this girl who has just been mugged by looters, and they have punched all the teeth out of her face. And I was like, seriously, are you kidding? Because we have a dentist office. And we had continual, did we not? We had people coming in that had fallen, broken teeth. We had people we had a dentist office, it's all good. So we had a guy that was a neurosurgeon, trapped in his basement, almost drowned. Got him out. He had like a crawl space. And he had gotten trapped in there because he was doing something with the sump pump. Turned out he was a neurosurgeon. We were like, are you kidding? You're not leaving. So, and he's actually the one that did the girl, the C-section girl. So it was really kind of neat. So here's one of our old stretchers. We actually had them on lawn chairs. We had them on boxes. But that's the operating table right there. And you can see we have an IV stand right here that's made out of an old dress rack. That's exactly how we were doing it. Now, during all this, I just want you to know, we have no comms, we have no power. Oh, and the fun part was, remember several slides ago I said 30,000 people went to shelters? So in Port Arthur, there are several thousand that they put in 2 places. One was the school, one was the bowling alley. That would be the school. So both of those flooded, so we lost our shelters. So now we've got people sleeping outside on the asphalt. The conditions were a little rough. That's a speed limit sign, so you weren't going to get a speeding ticket because that would stand up in court. This is the neighborhood just outside of our island. If you went 100 yards in any direction of that mall, this is the neighborhood. We were surrounded. We had been islanded. And the volunteers kept coming. Now, I'm not saying that law enforcement and fire departments and everything else, it's not that they weren't doing anything. It's just a matter of where were they? We knew they were doing stuff, but they weren't by us. And we couldn't figure out who knew to send all these helicopters to where we were. Because there was still nobody in charge. There never was. 9 days and no one was ever in charge, but the helicopters never stopped coming. We did not actually find out the entire story until 2 weeks ago. So this is kind of our core team that the first night, this was them. And it grew from there. And so this became Rapido, which was the name that we gave the hospital. And that was only because Sergeant Rodriguez kept telling everybody to hurry up. So we came up with something that sounded like something we'd like. So there we are. That was the emergency hospital that we set up. The Walmart ended up being empty. There's a nice shot of the Walmart there. They had opened it up only for responders. The day that we were there, we went in, it was actually pretty sparse. The pharmacy, which was robbed, what they did was they busted a hole in the back wall of the pharmacy, crawled in, took it all out overnight. And then of course, Beaumont, remember Beaumont, up where the Waffle House was? We started to get patients from Beaumont, because the Beaumont Hospital, which was across the street from the Waffle House, was now underwater. Communication was interesting. There was an app that was created back in 2014, I believe, by two gentlemen. And this app was called Zello, Z-E-L-L-O. It's a free app. It's a communication app. Now, we could all get on right now. We could download Zello on our phones, and we could create a group. We could call it the Spencer Library, the only people that showed up for Eddie's program group. And what that would mean is that you and I could talk on our cell phones like walkie-talkies without having a cell phone signal. That's what we needed. 55,000 people were on Zello. It turned out that this is how the choppers knew where we were. There was a woman whose husband was a commander in the United States military by the name of Tambra Carnes. And Tambra Carnes was on Zello and had organized rescue groups from her home. She's become a very dear friend of ours and stayed with us through this entire thing, through February. And that's how they knew. Now, we still didn't know where all the helicopters were coming from, but it was civilians. It was people doing it. Now, there's a plus and a minus side to this whole thing, because while you could be on Zello, there was another issue. Anybody could be on Zello. So if you didn't have a closed group, which we couldn't have a closed group, we had open channel. So people would say, oh my God, me and my wife, we're on our roof, the water's up to the gutters, please send a boat, our 2 children are here. So I want you to picture something. I want you to picture the roof, like you saw in the news, and here's the guy and the lady and their 2 kids sitting on the roof, waving a white flag, right? And the water's up to here. So here comes the boat, and the boat pulls up to the roof, and the guy stands up and goes, thank God! And these rescuers get out of their boat, and 6 guys come over the other side of the roof and take the boat. So now Zello was being used to set people up. And this is where things got really interesting, because we ended up with 6 or 7 different militias that had gravitated towards the mall because of the activity, which made us really nervous the first couple of hours. And because you can recognize these guys. These are the guys that are, by God, the United States Constitution and the Second Amendment says that I don't have a president, and by God, these are the people that blew up the Oklahoma City building. They are armed to the teeth, and they're organized. It took us 2-3 hours maybe. And Robin and I approached the guy that seemed to be the biggest alpha dog, and we went up to him and said, we could have a real security problem here. The military doesn't have weapons. I don't know how much y'all know about the National Guard, but by the way, they don't have weapons. That was helpful. And so we said, look, if you guys can all behave, I think we could get along. We've got stuff we don't want stolen. We have people that can't be coming in here. We need to create a perimeter here. We need to keep people out of the loading dock. And we need to send people out on these rescues, because we just had a team. Jason was actually shot at the first time we sent him out. I said, so this is, and they were like, got this. And before I even turned around, I was like, man, that would so help if you could organize your people.
Mhm.
And he looked at me and he goes, you tell me what you want. Never had a lick of problems after that. These boys mounted up, went in every one of these boats, and there was gunfire every night. You could hear it out in the neighborhoods. But these guys protected every medical personnel that we ever sent out on a rescue. Nobody ended up getting shot. Nobody ended up getting killed. They were a fantastic intimidation factor, crazy as all get out. But man, I'll tell you what, love their country and they were there. And it was, and I'm gonna tell you, one of the things, I said this to the newspaper, one of the things I want you to walk away with is, if you watch the news today, if you watched the news last week, if you watched the news over the last year, you know that everybody in this country hates everybody else. But I'm gonna tell you the honest to God's truth now, 35 years, I was starting to believe that too until this. I watched a guy with Nazi tattoos hugging a black guy in that parking lot, making plans to go out and rescue an Asian family. None of that stuff mattered. There is still a remnant, that's what I told the newspaper, there's still a remnant of humanity that made this country what it is, that exists, and it rose here. At this point, we still don't have the government helping. We still don't, nobody's sending us money. We're just doing it. And the thing is, we're doing it together. And nobody's fighting. And nobody's in charge still. And nobody's had a fight. You imagine? You probably can't pull it off the library. There's that shot that's stacked up. That's how fast they're coming at us for a while. Here's what we just found out 2 weeks ago. And we're pretty dang proud of this. This is the USS Kearsarge. It's an amphibious assault ship stationed in Norfolk, Virginia. And when that hurricane started coming in, they sent the Kearsarge to us, not knowing it was us. They just sent the Kearsarge to where it was making landfall. I've never met anybody off of this ship. I have made plans to go back out next month because I am going to walk up to whoever it was that brought that to us. Because look what's on deck. There's the helicopters. We just found this out 2 weeks ago. We could never figure out where they were coming from. And the Army didn't know. It was the USS Kearsarge sitting out there in the water. And all they knew was they were sending everybody to a portable hospital in a Sears parking lot. So it's really cool how the story has just kind of, become real. The undocumented people, it was crazy down there because the numbers were so off. How many people? And we didn't know because there was undocumented people too. And so there was no way to say, oh, it's 5,000 or it's 10,000 or it's 15,000. We didn't know. We didn't know how many people we had. But you know what? Every need was met. You guys might remember this. I don't know if you can see this real clear, but the water line, well, the water line is right below her chair. The water here. There's the water line on this woman. She's in a wheelchair. You remember this story about the old people that were left in the, I shouldn't say old people, the elderly people that were left in the living facility? Okay, guess who went and got them out? We're pretty proud of that too. But this is how they were left, guys. That's it. That's the living facility. So, but this is how it was happening. Zello and Facebook, craziest thing. Look at help needed. Please share. This family is desperate. Do any y'all, it's like a real word down there. Y'all have, it's ye in the Bible, translated. Y'all have family or know anyone in Texas doing rescues with any sort of boat. Now, I don't know where she's from, but she's obviously not in Texas. But she's posting this on Facebook. And we actually assigned people to watch for this stuff with hashtags. This is how we were doing our rescues. A very dear friend is trapped in Katy, across from the high school. They have nowhere to go. The flood levels are rising in their house, and her husband is disabled with poor mobility, blah, blah, blah. If you're reading this, update. They're safe and rescued. Thank you for all your help. Friends in Katy, if you know of anyone with a boat, there's a disabled man in his boat. This is the message that went out. So somebody saw this. This message on one of our team went out. It was then they went out and found him, rescued, everything's done. And here's an update later. Husband has not been found in the hospital, but this is how it's happening. And it was happening that fast in real time. And people would post, or they'd get on Zello, or they'd Twitter. And this is exactly how we did rescues in Haiti. That's where we learned how to do this. We did this in Haiti. So we have people that know how to mine Facebook and seriously just look, and go, somebody needs rescued. And we'd get on the Zello app and just start. Here's where it gets bad. Remember when I had to call my wife and tell my wife that my son and I might not come home? Okay, so here's what happens. So, I got my son. This is me. My son's taking the picture. See the water? That cool color? It wasn't that color 2 hours before we got in it. 46 toxic waste Superfund sites. We didn't know. But we were in the water and it looked like beer. Then it kind of looked like ale. Now this is while we're walking. So the 3 of us are in the water. Out of our team of 4, 3 of us are in the water. And as we're walking through this water, there's Robin. It goes from beer colored to like a dark ale. And about 10 minutes later, it's glow stick green. Like antifreeze. When we got out of the water, our clothes were stained red. Like we'd been walking in cranberry juice. Look at all of the toxic waste sites that were inundated with water. 46 Superfund sites. I don't even know how many total, all flooded and all flowed this way. There's one of them right there. Lost half of her hair. Kidney failure at age 16. We were cleared of radioactive, our radioactive clearance was Valentine's Day, right? His had affected him so badly, he couldn't stay upright. His kidneys were failing. The CDC and Department of Public Health from the state of Texas was on this until May of this year. They have all of our records, all of our photos, all of our GPS locations, everything else, because now it turns out there's thousands of us that were doing water rescues in that. That's the bottom of the iceberg. And suddenly, as fast as it all happened, all of a sudden, word finally came from somewhere. And I'm going to say somewhere. We got a semi of water and a semi of ice. And was there MREs with it? Was it 2 trucks or 3 that night?
2 trucks that night because we got the ice in the water.
Okay, so it was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. These 2 trucks roll in, and this guy says, compliments to the governor. First ice we've seen. First water we've seen. Everything else has come in on helicopters. We tell them what we needed. We actually had, and if you watch the documentary, you'll see this, and I'll tell you guys how to get to that. It's a 2-hour documentary where we tell every detail of the story. But we actually ordered hundreds of cots off of Amazon and got them primed and got them airlifted from San Antonio. But this was the first government help we'd seen. And it came at 4. And at 10, they said, can you guys stay another week? And we said yes. We're at 9 days. We said yes at 10 o'clock. At 12 o'clock, they said, we only need half of you, I think, if I'm remembering that right. We only need half of you. That was at midnight. But the rest can go. We're going to start to gradually die down here because something had opened up. It was Dallas or something. And it was at 3 a.m. They said, you have till 10. You have till 10 and there can't be a trace of this. And I looked at the sergeant and he goes, follow orders, dude. And at 9:30, everything was packed and everybody rolled out of that parking lot. Now, for those 9 days, this stuff had been on Facebook. Videos like this, videos like what I showed you, the pictures that I showed you. It was on Facebook, it was on United States National Guard's Facebook. There was a reporter, like that lady right there, that she kept coming in from the local newspaper. She was doing interviews, she was doing articles, she was doing photographs and everything else. My documentary is the only place where you can find any of it anymore. Everything was scrubbed, everything's gone. We were given exactly that amount of time to clean that whole place up. Gone. There was not a trace. There wasn't an empty water bottle in that parking lot and we pulled out. And the military know how to pack their stuff. But what happened, I think, was it was about to open up where the press could come in. It was about, like, the water was starting to recede and things were starting to calm down. And I think what happened was, this was what was necessary, but it's something that the general public would never understand. And it was like, if the water went down much more, highways were gonna open up, and the minute everybody got there, it was just gonna turn into, you know, oh my God, you can't do this, you can't, what do you mean you did this in a loading dock of a Sears, what do you mean? And what was sad to us was that, I think the bottom line of it all was that, I think the decision somewhere was made that America wouldn't understand why everyone was getting along and nobody was in charge. That was the feeling we were left with. So we all picked up and left, which was okay, because Irma hit. And the Florida Keys. And the Florida Keys was bad because, you know, you guys heard about the death tolls, you know, there's 18 people and there's only 86 people on Puerto Rico, thank God, that's all that died. And we started screaming bloody murder, look at her face. We were screaming bloody murder about 2-3 weeks into it, because they were saying the death toll was 86, or whatever that number was. And we kept saying 86. We have a team in Puerto Rico that's got more than 86 stacked in one building. Well, it turns out, and I don't know what the exact number is now, but I think it's over 4,000. Now they got a subpoena and they released, and so, but they were keeping those numbers down below 100. And we kept saying, no, there's a big problem. There's a huge problem. The Weather Channel was allowed to go down to Marathon, to the Keys, down to Marathon to exit 172. They closed off 172. We knew why. We were on the phone with them on our way in because they called us down there. And we were on our way down and we said, well, what about 172? We hear that 172 is closed. After that, it gets kind of dicey getting down into the Keys. Well, the reason was because there are small boats coming in from off of like the Carolina shore and the Georgia shore. And there's people coming in. Think about what the Keys are. All the Keys are is a bunch of tourists and a bunch of treasure hunters and rich people. So they're either super poor and living on the beach, or they're super rich and living on the beach. And there was people coming in on boats and sea-doos, and they were looting down there. But the reports that we were getting was, at the point where we were on our way down, we had made it about halfway, and that was when we got the reports of the nets, and they were using the nets to pull the bodies back onto shore. People that it's an undocumented population again down on the Keys. We'll never know how many people ended up down in the water. But they actually let the Weather Channel come down after 2 weeks, and we actually got to see some of the footage later. And it's very funny because the Weather Channel guy is kind of standing like this. You can see a shelter behind him, and it's just like ours. Only the thing is, the camera for 1 second jiggles like this, and for 1 split second in the video, you can see the word demort. Well, the government kept saying that demort wasn't down there. Well, demort is the portable mortician unit. And so it was funny, the framing of their camera, the guy was jiggling the camera and all of a sudden jerked over, and it was, you know, so I think that there was a lot of, and I guess there's arguments both ways, but I think there was so much going on that I think there was only so much information being released at a time, so that there wasn't a massive panic, because this was way bigger than you guys know. I mean, it was way, way bigger. The special needs were the same. You guys remember the news story about Hollywood Hills? The same thing with the rest home and the heat. The coordination was unreal. We have never seen disasters like this. The only time we had ever really seen anything like this, where the Department of Defense got involved, was Hurricane Sandy, and then it happened again in Florida. Florida was incredibly controlled, but the weird thing was, where was the mutual aid again? Well, this was about the time that we figured out why we hadn't had any help. Remember how Harvey had hit once, hit twice, hit 3 times, and it had dumped on Houston? Well, what had happened was all the responders from Port Arthur went to Houston. That's where everybody was. We were about at this point in Florida when we realized why things had been so bad in Port Arthur. It was because Houston got hit, so Port Arthur was like, we're coming. And so all the responders from the Gulf went up to Houston to help, and then the thing hit again, and they had left no one back home. They had islanded their own communities. But Maria hit, and this was the good one, and I can tell you right now, I, again, will never forget, I had a woman. By the way, if you don't understand people on the island, don't try. It's pointless. It's like a weird language. It's not even like a weird language. But they're phenomenal. And I remember communicating over the radio and using Zello and using Facebook. And I remember this woman, she had 3 children. And I remember talking her through the roof coming off of her house, and then talking her through as 2 more walls came off of her house, and she held on to her children. And they were pummeled with glass, and I probably spent another hour and a half with her miraculously. She kept, we were on Facebook Messenger and doing the live talk on Facebook because it's less of a signal, and we were able to communicate. And it was broken when she had to keep calling me back on it, but walking her through how to pull glass out of her kids, and as the hurricane hit that night. So how's that for debris? Good news for you, your park will not look that bad when the water recedes, but it did look that bad there. So that big fancy truck of mine, I've never even seen an airplane like this. My son knows a lot about stuff like this. I've never seen an airplane like this. But our truck fit up there pretty nicely and went off to Puerto Rico. And by the way, for the record, it's still there. In fact, there it is, right there, Puerto Rico. Deja vu all over again. And then, of course, there was the air rescues that were absolutely unreal. This is how we got supplies over there. We have a partnership with one of those flight companies that actually flies like sick children to Mayo. You don't have the money, and so your grandchild gets flown up to Mayo. And so it's a group of about 500 pilots nationwide. And some of them, you can see here how we were getting stuff out. They're donating these little tiny planes. And but eventually some of these pilots just started ripping the seats out of their planes, turning them into cargo planes for us, which was absolutely amazing just to get stuff down there. Just so you know how things were done, as far as portable stuff down in the Virgin Islands, the hospital was destroyed, the San Luis Hospital. We spent some time in there coordinating with the Department of Public Health, again, filling a gap. But in Puerto Rico, the United States Naval Hospital ship, the USNS Comfort, actually rolled in. And if you've never seen this, this is something you might want to look at online. This is crazy. This is one of the operating rooms. This is one of the finest hospitals in the world. I'll put it up against Johns Hopkins and the whole thing floats. This is the craziest thing. I have no idea what the numbers are. I mean, it's hundreds of surgeons. I mean, it's a cruise ship hospital is what it is. I mean, it's amazing. It is strictly built just for that. You can see kind of the shape of it is different. It doesn't have that streamlined thing. It's actually a building that floats, and so that's what was taking care of all the patients in Puerto Rico. Over on the Virgin Islands, though, San Luis Hospital was destroyed. It had been rebuilt after Andrew, and so let me just tell you what the situation is there. My last update is that the portable hospital was delivered the first week of June to the Virgin Islands. So, guys, they lost their hospital in September, just to let you know. So, but all of the help that came in, this is the Grand Celebration. I think this is Princess Cruise Lines owns that, and that was actually brought into the Virgin Islands. That is a huge cruise ship. If you've ever been like next to a cruise ship, they're just cool. But that was actually brought in. FEMA actually rented entire cruise ships, and that's how they housed all the volunteers. So when we were heading to the Virgin Islands, this is where we were told we were going to be staying. But it filled so quickly with FEMA people that no one else was allowed on the ship. This whole thing did nothing but house FEMA and the power guys. The guys from, so even the guys from like Alliant Energy and some of the guys from here stayed on this boat. So if you know anybody that went down to the Virgin Islands, this is where they slept. They slept on the Grand Celebration, which was not too far from where we were. We had amazing accommodations, did we not? When we arrived, we arrived in the middle of the night at an airport that had no roof, and it had a couple of walls, although when you did step off your plane, you could see straight through. And we stepped off, we got into a Jeep that had managed to live through the hurricane, but had not lived well. And so we got into that Jeep, and we started driving through this rainforest, and I was like, where are we staying? Because, yeah, and there is nothing left of the roads either in this place. And so we were driving, and we're like, where are we staying? Because we were thinking maybe by the Grand Celebration, all the responders over that way. Oh no, we got to a place at Strawberry Point, it was called, which sounds beautiful, doesn't it? Strawberry Point, it's like a place to just like hold hands or make out or something. And so the Jeep pulled up, and there was a driver and the woman from the health department, and then there was me and you, right? That's how we were laid out. And so I got out this way, our luggage was in the back, so I got out this way and moved this direction. So as I got out of my car, I went like this to say thank you to the driver. Robin got out and moved to the back to pop the door to get our luggage, and that was when the first bullet went between me and Robin. That gunfire never stopped. And Puerto Rico was worse. But that was our welcome to the Virgin Islands. It was about 1 a.m. And then it was about 1:15 a.m. that, how did this happen? We had different phones from, it was like Verizon and T-Mobile and all those phones going, and all of a sudden an alert came in on my AT&T phone that I had bought specifically to go to the Virgin Islands, and that this thing came in and we were in a tsunami warning because of an earthquake that had just happened offshore. Because of all the water, the earthquake activity picked up and lasted almost 5 months down there. So we went through a lot. There's the airport. So that was in good shape. There's us getting ready to go to another island. This is kind of an interesting story. This is Eugene Phipps. Eugene Phipps is a good friend of ours. He's on the rescue team in St. Croix, on the island of St. Croix. And one of the reasons why we went over was because Eugene Phipps was doing a rescue on the second floor of an apartment building, had the face ripped off, and he fell and smashed both of his legs. No hospital, no ambulance, no airlift. He was kept there for a little over a week with no medical treatment other than immobilization. And then we finally got one of those private pilots to go and get him, and he still is recuperating in Georgia still to this day. It's July. So that's where Eugene is. This picture I'm pretty proud of. If you could look at this picture, right there, there's a girl, and right there's another little girl. So let me tell you how this goes. There's a police officer on the island of St. Croix, single mom, who had these two daughters, 12 and 9, I think is about right. And both of them had severe allergy problems, and as the mold continued over the course of the first couple of weeks, things were getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. The air evac list was such a nightmare that the waiting list was up to like 6 weeks. But we had to get them off the island right away. We tried everything. We couldn't find any more pilots. They were grounding planes. They were stopping supplies from going in and out because there was people taking advantage, and it was a nightmare. They were capitalizing on stuff. You couldn't get anything in. People were selling stuff that was coming in to help and hijacking flights and everything else. And so it was about the middle of the night when we finally got around to, I found the right number. I will find the right number eventually. And I found the right number, called the commander of the United States Coast Guard in St. Croix. And I said, I know you have a helicopter. I said, here, I'm just going to tell you how this is going to work. I said, I'm in central Iowa. I'm going to come down. I'm going to steal your helicopter. And I'm going to get those girls off myself because I know you've received phone calls about this already. And he said, I have, but I'm not authorized to do this. He goes, but you know what? Give me a second. And he literally had the phone still in his hand, and he must have walked into wherever they sleep or whatever because it was the middle of the night, and I heard him yell. And he said, hey, everybody up. I got a guy on the phone from central Iowa says he's going to come down here and steal our helicopter to get them girls off the island. And that just seems stupid because we have the keys. By morning, this is those girls getting off in Fort Lauderdale. Not only did his boys stand up and go, you know what, screw orders. They got them girls off, flew them to Puerto Rico, where they had called ahead and got another group of Coast Guard guys with a bigger chopper that could make it to Florida. They made it home before anybody knew they were gone. The guys from Puerto Rico made it to Fort Lauderdale and back before anybody knew they were gone, and those girls are living in Fort Lauderdale. Straight A's, both of them in school this past year, and they stay in touch. But what used to take 3 days took 3 weeks. What took 3 weeks took 3 months. The first shipment that we sent down there, we sent down in November, and it arrived in March. Correct?
Who's messing up the works?
UPS was gone, post offices were destroyed, records, computers. It was horrible. It was like being back in the 1800s. That wasn't even political. That was just a nightmare of shipping stuff. Then you had the crime side, if it did get there. So that made things a lot worse. Communications were kind of interesting. We actually put a new drone up in the air. We'd worked on a project with AT&T earlier that year. And that drone right there is actually a portable cell tower and is still actually creating cell service in Puerto Rico. It's a tethered drone, so that's kind of a neat project. Drones became really important. There are some of the roads, pictures that our team took in Puerto Rico with the drone. And a lot of the roads were like that. The earthquakes never stopped. We experienced quite a few of them. We were in quite a few tsunami warnings. while we were down there. But the crimes were some of the worst. We lost 2 shipping containers out of Puerto Rico full of medical supplies. What was happening was things would make it through U.S. Customs, and then they would go and somebody would pop them open or steal them, and so you almost had to make arrangements. We finally got to the point where we started making arrangements where somebody armed would actually go on the day that we knew that it was arriving, and it really got ugly. I can tell you that there is a politician, and that's all I'm going to say because we're recording this, there was a politician in Puerto Rico who became very controversial during this whole thing, and what was happening was she had a team where she authorized that team to actually go out onto the tarmac of the airfield and go through the boxes, take what they wanted before the boxes were sealed back up and given to the person who was waiting for them. We had airlines, what made it so hard to get stuff over was we had airlines like Southwest and American and like that were donating entire flights to get the elderly and the handicapped off the islands. And we had Tambra Carnes, the lady that was helping us with the helicopters that we finally met. Well, we now know who she is and we're talking to her. And so we're hearing that there's all these flights that are being donated, and that's like 150 seats, 200 seats. And so her son is actually in Major League Baseball. He's a pitcher. And so she knows the guys from the MLB who had just been taken for $1.7 million that they had donated. MLB, the Major League Baseball, had just donated all that money. That was gone. And so she went to Dallas-Fort Worth to greet a plane full of the handicapped and elderly because she had helped coordinate that flight. All donated seats. The second person off the plane was the mother of another MLB baseball player. And she walked up to this woman, whatever her name was, right there in the airport, and she said, "What flight were you just on?" And she goes, "Well, I was on flight blah, blah, blah." And she goes, "That was a donated flight for handicapped and the elderly." She goes, "Sweetie, this is my 4th trip back to the States. I'm getting those tickets for $45. Once the airlines got wise to that, there was no checked baggage allowed on American Airlines for 4 weeks. We could tell them it was medical supplies. I could prove that it was medical supplies. We couldn't do it. If it wasn't carry-on, it wasn't going. And then we had all the paid protesters. When they started showing up, that's when we started pulling people off the island. They started sending protesters down, anti-Trump protesters down to Puerto Rico. They were the same protesters we had seen in Baltimore and at the Ferguson riots. They literally were flying them in. Started with Puerto Rico, then they started flying them over to the Virgin Islands. That started making things a little rough too. Things started getting ugly then. This was another thing, Whitefish Energy. John, Whitefish Energy is owned by 2 people?
2 people out of Dallas, but the company's based out of Montana.
And Whitefish Energy is run out of what?
It is run out of...
Well, it's a pizza place.
Yes, it is run out of, their corporate office location is based out of a pizza joint and a boutique in Montana.
Nail and hair salon. 2 guys saw the opportunity to get the energy contract. They negotiated, President Trump had activated the whole FEMA situation where what happens is it's called multi-fleet response. This is where Alliant Energy goes in and helps for free, and that was occurring on a Friday. On the Saturday, these 2 gentlemen cut a deal with Puerto Rico, so on Monday, they were already there. Guys, see these numbers right here? They brought over 1,000 men. All the money that it would have taken to fix the electric was gone in a month. Look at the rates. This does not include another $320 or something for hotel, and then another $120 day per diem for food. Per man.
And so did those guys actually know what they were doing?
Oh yeah, oh
They
yeah.
didn't know what they were doing?
They were good. And the people thought they were heroes because the people didn't know this part. They were real good. I mean, this is a mountain region, man. Half of this work is being done off of helicopters. But the problem was there was a system in play and it was a crooked deal on the backside. So they ended up, multi-fleet response ended up going back down. And they're still working on it. Food was interesting. We were telling Paul all kinds of stories, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to get into it, but we were eating at restaurants that had no running water and no power. Best story that we told Paula tonight was the restaurant where I said, "What kind of fish is that?" And she said, "I don't know, my kids just got it." And the kids were actually behind the restaurant dragging it out of the debris on the beach because they had already put a ban on fishing because the water was contaminated, so they were just waiting for the fish to flow up on the shore, and then they'd go grab the fish. And then Dad was cooking it on a barbecue grill behind the restaurant, and then bringing it in and laying it out in the unrefrigerated cooler. So, but I had my week-old coffee that she barbecued for me, so I was happy. I just needed coffee, and I didn't even care what it tasted like at that point. Jason, Jason did not leave there until
Last week of April.
the last week of April. And, however, don't believe all this. This is not true, because Jason was actually bit by a spider and lost almost a half a pound of his back calf, still on the Virgin Islands. No hospital, limited treatment. He was laid up, they almost lost him. He was laid up for about a week and a half. Finally, they flew a doctor to him and got him back on his feet. And then he went right back to work and stayed there until the last week of April. And so that whole time, so Jason, from August to April, we kept Jason. And I'd tell you something about that young man, for as big an idiot as he looks like. When we were done at those 9 days in Texas, he called home to Monterey, California. If you know that area, it's pretty well off. And where he was an EMT, had a high-paying job. And he called his boss and he said, "I just found something bigger than me, and I'm not coming back." And has no intention. He's still going. He's taking a break right now with his family, and we'll end up sending him somewhere else. So, but he cannot shoot webs out of his wrist. He was very disappointed about that. He was very clear that he had been bitten by this seemingly radioactive spider and got nothing. So he was very angry by that. Can't stick to walls. I asked him if he had kissed a girl upside down yet. He said no. I said, well, apparently you're supposed to do that too, because I only saw the movie once. But these gentlemen here, the two gentlemen right here, were fresh back from Afghanistan when they went over to Puerto Rico. We kept them over there as long as we could, but the stress got to everybody, and that made things a little rough, and we had to get them back. But oddly enough, that one there, Jason, this is another Jason, has returned and is in Puerto Rico now, despite some issues with PTSD and exhaustion. So it affected quite a bit, but at least we don't have to worry about actual hurricanes right here in Iowa, except for that little climate change thing I was telling you about. I wanted to show you something. This is where the hurricane happened. This was 2016. I want to see if I can explain something to you. This is 2016, and this is 2017. So if you can see which way they shifted, it just shifted just a hair, right? This way. See how this was dead on this way, and now there's forward over here. So the system shifted. Well, this year, they're saying it shifts a little more. If it shifts just a little more and stays at this strength, which is what they're saying, if it does this, here's what they're saying: 2018 will be somewhat a repeat of 2017, but will be the strongest cycle in 70 years. So if this continues to shift, and shift just a little bit, it'll hit Corpus Christi, which means it'll actually slam Galveston, and we will actually recreate 1900 exactly this year. So the great storm, though, here's what happens. This is the 1900 storm. Look where it went. You know who lives there, right? That's you. So that's where it actually went. Actually destroyed buildings in Milwaukee. So could happen. To become an island is really not that difficult, and to stay an island takes a lot of work. That's a shopping cart that those gentlemen. This is a paved bridge, and it's gone. And to my knowledge, this is still how they're getting groceries to their village out there. Now, when you do hear stories about, hey, those people in Puerto Rico still don't have power, I want you to know something. A lot of people in Puerto Rico have power. The thing is, most of the people that don't have power that you're hearing about did not have power before the storm. We are talking about villages that are way out there that they didn't have it before. So this is going to end up being a blessing for them, because there's been a lot of pressure to get those people power. Here's some story snapshots for you. I'm going to do this really, really fast as I can, guys. We're getting really short. So here's the 2 units that we had. It took 12 people every time a helicopter landed. We had 12 people that would hang across the front of the tent against those 180-mile-an-hour winds, because that was full of patients. And every time a helicopter would land, it would lift those tents up off the ground. So we would yell helicopter really loud, and we had guys that stood around, those militia guys, and they would stand around and they would all go and jump and grab the flaps and use their body weight. So it was 12 times 200 plus that would hang across the front of that. And it wasn't until the last 2 days that all of a sudden I was like, why are we doing this? And we went and got a bunch of flats of water, and we started piling flats of water like sandbags on the inside of the tent all the way around. So in the documentary, you can actually see it's like a wall of water on the inside. And those 12 guys were like, seriously, we couldn't have done this like a week ago. We actually have pants that still to this day, if you take them, are you wearing a pair of yours? We have pants that if you take the material and you go like this and you rub them like this, you'll actually scratch your hands up. It's asphalt rock that was put into those pants at 180 miles an hour, won't come out. That was one of the weirdest experiences like ever. There's a picture from that shelter again. This is, she had to be woken up when the water came up at night on those people in the shelters. There's Jason. Some of the problems that we had were crazy. All of these guys are Coast Guardsmen that had gotten into water that was full of some kind of weird bug. And they came in there, bit all over. Looked like they'd been eaten by bed bugs for a week. It had happened in 1 hour. So this was the Holiday Inn. The Holiday Inn, we had a gentleman that asked if we needed to take showers. And of course we were like, oh my God, that'd be like really cool. And we had been 3 days maybe, and we needed showers really bad. So he said, I got a buddy of mine that owns a Holiday Inn. And I said, where is it? And he said, well, it's 2 miles up the road. And I said, they're using the Holiday Inn as a boat landing. I already knew we were launching boats out of that Holiday Inn. And he goes, yeah, but the water's still running on the second floor. So this is me in the elevator with a foot of water in it. Because that's just a picture you have to take. Like, how often do you get a picture like that? So I had to take a picture of me in an elevator with a foot of water. And then it was that I realized that there was still 10 feet below that. So if there was a foot of water in the elevator, I was actually standing in an elevator of 11 feet of water, and I jumped back out. So, but look, the lights are still on and everything. This is probably one of the most dangerous things we did the whole time. We were walking around the building full of water with the electric still on. And so that's where we took showers. We took showers upstairs, but there was only one room. The rest of it was all evacuees up there. There was one room, and if you can imagine, there's about 80 of us using that room. We'd just come in one after another to take showers. That was the grossest thing in the world, because it was like almost like Robin was the only girl. So like, you know, just all the moms in the room. You can picture that room, right? By the way, there was no housekeeping. So one of my favorite pictures, but there's our truck that was on our way into Texas. This is how you handle that flashlight with no batteries. Duracell shows up. They show up every time we're at a major disaster. I think they have 6 of these trucks. Look at these drawers. Those are all batteries. Free. Every one of these pops open, and every one of them has 10 outlets so you can charge your phone. And they have shown up at every disaster that I've been in since like 04, I think. It's just the coolest thing in the world. Absolutely cool. So, but all those batteries are free, and they literally airdrop batteries in to restock that truck every day. So that was kind of cool. Wow, did we get creative. There's a monster truck right there. And this is how we learned hammocks. Hammocks between, you know, and I'll tell you what, if you're ever trapped, just so you guys know, if this ever happens here, because you need to walk away knowing that it could, the cart corral at a Walmart is the perfect length to swing a hammock in. And Walmart sells hammocks. That was the beauty of it. So we had some guys that found out, so there was people sleeping in all the cart corrals, which was really kind of neat. But it was a little scary, especially going to the gas stations. So there was one of our rigs, that's the rig that we actually sent Jason out with. The gas stations were probably one of the more scary places when we were coming in, because there was dozens and dozens of stores you'd pull up to get supplies at a gas station. This was on our way into Port Arthur, and you know, as like by all those water areas, and then on our way out, it was even worse, where we'd have to stop for fuel. This is pretty much how you had to drive, right here. In fact, that's a photograph of, this is my hand, that's the steering wheel, and there's my rifle across my lap. This gentleman here became quite famous. I believe he shot 8 that were going after his wife and his kid in the car. He got out to gas up, and they came around the other side. If I remember the story right, that's how that happened. And anyway, he became famous. That picture I took off the internet. But that's how bad it was. It was, well, it brings out the good element, it brought out the bad element. Flights were interesting until flights got canceled. And then, well, not to worry, if we go to the other island, surely we'll make it back. And then the winds go to 75 miles an hour because another tropical storm comes in, and they inform me that the ferry is no longer working. Which is when you're on that island and you go, our clothes are on that island. And so Robin and I got to go through that, which was kind of interesting. There's another picture that was taken right after the military joined us. This is right after we came out of that high point. in that town where we picked up the military, but moving people any way we could. There's the buses. This is inside of a helicopter right here. You see how packed they had the people, the evacuees. This is a miracle story right here. Any of you know what that is? I told you we didn't have any way to move people. We were walking them, and it was about the fourth morning. I woke up. I was sleeping, sitting up in the truck, and I woke up and this thing was sitting in front of my truck. And I was like adjusting my eyes at first, and I thought someone had parked a bike in front of my truck. And so I got out and I walked over to it. It was brand new. I mean, like, it was gorgeous. And it had all the batteries and everything with it. And I don't know where it came from. Well, long story short, we never did. We never did find out. God gave it to us, I guess. That's what we said. And what's really neat is that we had the opportunity to meet with the CEO of that company and show him pictures of the miracle striker that God gave us in the middle of the night. And so Stryker has actually now stepped up to help our team to make sure that we don't have to wait for God to give us one anymore. So they're going to make sure we have them every time we need them. So, but the whole company, they actually brought over 80 employees to come and meet us and to see the pictures and to watch the documentary. And they're all bawling because that's a product that sells for tens of thousands of dollars. But it was the one that we got for nothing that just tore them up, man. They were just, it was the most beautiful thing to watch that company so proud that they were part of something like that. But little things made a big difference. There's another picture of our little operating room there. So here you go. There's Alan, John, Robin, and myself. And that gentleman right there is?
First Lieutenant Donovan Edwards.
So he was second in command?
Yes.
So he was the one that was continually working with Jonathan. These two were in charge of one section of the mall parking lot, and then I worked with Sergeant Rodriguez in the other section of the parking lot. So I want you to know this wasn't about our team. What it really was about the fact that the country still can work. It really can. There's still, if it happened right now, there's no doubt in my mind. Now, would I get shot at? Yep. We have a little contest going. It's been a rough year for us. This wasn't our only deployment. So Robin and I are running neck and neck until a couple weeks ago. We've both been shot at 9 times this year in the last 12 months. And Robin knocked it out of the park and went 10 just a few weeks ago. Somebody was a little angry about the water situation down south. So, so it's an interesting job. But the thing is, there's still those kind of people. There's always going to be those kind of people. But what was amazing was everybody that was around us became these soldiers of humanity. It was a sea of people that just cared about each other. And this has really been the message that, man, if you just dare to do it, to become a part of something bigger than yourself, you know. We had Tamara Kearns never left her house. But she sent us all the helicopters, you know. Can you imagine? I don't even know. There was, I mean, it was hundreds a day, hundreds of patients a day we were able to treat because of some woman in her house. So it was like, you know, not everybody has to go and do the dumb stuff we do. You know, stay at home and do something, but it was pretty amazing. It was good to be back home. It really, truly was. It was good to come back and see my wife. And then, of course, Paula, now would probably be a good time. You know what happens when you come home after a long deployment. We're due November 1st.
Are you kidding me?
No, it's a boy.
Good Lord, man.
So, another one for the legacy. Another one for the legacy. So, be prepared for the day that you're on an island. Make sure that you don't island yourself. Think about things like power, medical, food and water, safety and security, and communication. You know, I've stood in this room now for years and years and talked about preparedness, but 2 things, man. It could happen here. We could be islanded here. It wouldn't take much. And the other thing is, man, be ready for it when it comes. I mean, I don't think you got to be a hoarder. I don't think you got to have a bunker underground. I think what you need to do, don't fight with your neighbor no more. Because you know what? We didn't have nothing. But it all worked because we got along with everybody. I really, you know, for years I've been saying, you know, stockpile stuff, have enough water, have enough food, have enough. You know what? I don't know if that's what it is anymore. Watching what's been going on the last couple of years, and you know, 5 days ago, I was on national news at one of the big immigration protests, and you know, I just stand there and I'm looking and I'm like, oh my God, you realize if we all got along, it'd be stone soup, right? You don't need to have everything if you talk to your neighbor, because that's what happened during all this. It happened on the islands, happened in Puerto Rico, happened in Texas, happened in Florida, happened in Georgia, happened in North Carolina, happened in South Carolina. Everybody just got along. It was amazing. Lifeinthearena.org On that website, that's our nonprofit website. If you go to lifeinthearena.org, go right to the homepage, and you scroll all the way down to the bottom. I'll give you a card. You scroll all the way to the bottom of the homepage. It says Soldiers of Humanity documentary. And so if you scroll all the way down, the whole documentary is right there. You can watch it online.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that, cause you referred to the.
Yep,
documentary.
absolutely. And you can sit there. It's 2 hours long. So it's me and Jason. So
I don't work.
60 minutes of it is horrible. The other 60 minutes is me. No, I'll tell you the truth about this documentary. What makes it really special? It was filmed in a coffee house back in my hometown, back in Eldora. But here's how we did it. When we left Texas, we didn't see Jason for a little over 2 months. This was the first time Jason and I had gotten together and had time to talk. We had not spoken yet about everything that went on. So what the documentary is it's my story and Jason's story from both perspectives for the first time. So he's hearing me for the first time and I'm hearing him for the first time. So you'll see us in the documentary and I'll be going, hey, we pulled into Beaumont and the Waffle House was closed. And he goes, oh my God, I went there and the Waffle House was closed. That's why I went straight to Port Arthur. So you watch us discover how some kind of divine hand put us together, and it's just a really, really cool story. So it's done really well. That doesn't have to be as loud as it is. But seriously, if there's something that we can do in this country that makes sense to me right now, several of the contracts that I have and several of the things that I'm working on have included this recent immigration issue, the riots, the protests, the unrest, the killing of police officers. There was none of that. I don't think it matters what religion you are. I think everybody has to be a historian because you can deny that there's a God, and I'm okay with that. I respect that. But you can't deny that there's a history. And all throughout history, the Roman Empire, the Crusades, I don't care, pick one. People rallied around a flag. And I'll tell you the thing that hit me the hardest, it wasn't the death, it wasn't the blood, it wasn't the gore, it wasn't the loss. What was hard was when we came home. We got home and we hadn't been watching TV. We've been busy being Americans. Think about the time frame. We were gone in August. We were gone in September. We came home for a short break for about a week and a half at the beginning of October, and then we left again. It was football season. That first Sunday home, you guys. Not after where we'd been. See, down there, 180 mile an hour winds, and my son made sure that freaking American flag stayed up. Our tents went down, tables went down, lights went down. Man, we watched soldiers sleeping on cots in the parking lot, and a chopper would come in with no notice. We have video of soldiers airborne, holding onto their cots, screaming. But my son made sure that flag didn't go nowhere, because as long as that flag was there, everybody did their job. Man, if we could just rally behind the flag, I wouldn't care if you were gay or straight or thought kids should be in cages, shouldn't be in cages. God, the bottom line is, let's find an end to the argument together under one flag. That's how wars were won. That's how the church was started. We came home and everybody was fighting to not have anything to do with a flag that I had just watched America get saved under. I don't know how far that goes, but Paula has known me a long time, and she knows that every time I come, I'll try to drop at least one thing and see if it grows somewhere. And I think that's what we need, because that's what we saw. My son was 15 when we left. My wife stood on that porch that you saw in that picture, and she looked at me and she said, "Don't be stupid," which is about all the emotion I get out of her anymore after all these years. She knows I'm going to end up in hospital somehow. When Robin called her, the first hospital I was in was, we were on our way to the Florida Keys, and I was in the hospital, and Robin called and said Eddie's in the hospital, and seriously, my wife was like, well, of course he is. But right before we left, she got real sober, and I'd never seen her like this before. And she looked at John, and she said, you make sure you come home. And he said, Mom, you know I'm gonna come home. He said, I'll either be wearing it or I'll be under one, but I'll come home. At 15. Flag's kind of important to me. And I'll be honest with you, I was never like this. The whole patriotism thing just really wasn't never like that much. But I watched people rally around a flag. And all of a sudden they had everything in common. And they had a common goal. And that was to end pain and suffering. To make sure that people were okay. And I'm telling you, man, when you watch a rebel without a cause in a Confederate hat holding on to this big old black dude, promising him that he'll take care of his family. That happened under a flag. There was one flag they both believed in. And man, I'll tell you what, it was powerful to watch guys like that getting together and families like that working together. I think we can do it. I really do. That's why we made the documentary. It's why we're still going out telling the story. And I don't know, our little band, I don't know how much damage we're gonna do, but we don't go anywhere without lifting it. And I don't know, you raise it, people do gather. Not everybody. There's a lot of fighting right now. The fighting I saw at that big old protest the other day. Boy, I'll tell you what, I watched it burned, stomped on, and beaten. But I know what it can do if we'd rally behind it. So whoever you know and whatever you're involved with, and man, God help you if it ever happens here. But I'll tell you what, if we show up, you'll know we're here because there'll be a truck with a big old flag on it when we get to town. So thank you very much, you guys. Thanks for sitting here.
Thank you.